Elite professors try to humiliate a black student. Unaware the girl has genius IQ, they laughed before she even opened her mouth. Tenured professors, men and women with awards, degrees, and egos as big as the campus hall they sat in. She was just the janitor's daughter. And today, they would teach her a lesson. But the moment she stepped up to the board, something shifted. Not in the room, but in the silence. Because she was not there to impress them. Alumni donors were watching. Everything was designed to highlight brilliance, but only the kind they approved of. Her name was Amara. She did not wear designer clothes. She did not come from legacy. She did not even have a seat at the table. But that morning, as she mopped the hallway floors outside the math wing, she overheard a professor mocking a first-year student who had backed out of the challenge. She probably realized she is no match for a real intellect. He laughed, sipping his coffee. Amara paused, gripping the mop tighter. Another professor joked, "If that janitor's kid thinks she can make it here, maybe she should solve this equation instead." He scribbled something brutal on the board outside. The Riemann hypothesis, unsolved for over 160 years. She stared at it quietly, then turned and walked away. 10 minutes later, she stepped into the hall again. Not to clean, not to cower, but to speak. "I want to try," she said. The professors chuckled. "You want to try this? You even know what this means?" "I do," she replied calmly. "And I know why it terrifies you." There was an audible gasp from the few students still lingering around. Someone pulled out their phone to record. One professor leaned forward. "All right then, impress us." What they did not know, what nobody knew, was that Amara had been solving equations like this since she was 13. Her father, the night janitor, had once been a math professor in Nigeria before fleeing political violence. He taught her everything he knew. She had no degree, but she had genius written in her DNA. Now she just had to prove it. The chalk felt foreign in her hand, but the numbers did not. Amara stepped toward the board, slowly erasing the taunt written by the professor. In its place, she began to draw symbols, functions, transformations. Not quickly, not theatrically, but with absolute precision. At first, there was snickering in the room. A janitor's daughter solving a centuries-old problem? This had to be some kind of stunt. But then something changed. The room fell quiet. The professors leaned in. One of them muttered, "Wait, that is not random. That is a known approach, but she is extending it." Amara kept going. The murmurs turned to silence. The students who were watching live-streamed the board. Dozens of others joined. Someone whispered, "She is reducing the zeta function, and it is working." What they were witnessing was not just someone doing math. They were watching someone dance with numbers, taming chaos into clarity. Her hands moved with a rhythm not learned in classrooms but forged in quiet nights over her father's shoulder, studying by flashlight in janitor closets. And just before she placed the final mark, Amara turned to the room and said, "I did not come here to impress you. I came to remind you that brilliance does not come wrapped in wealth." Then she dropped the chalk. Silence. Until one professor stood up, eyes wide, and said this. This could be historic. The camera panned to the chalkboard, now filled with what appeared to be a breakthrough. And all at once, the entire room realized they had tried to humiliate her. But instead, they had just become witnesses to something unforgettable. Amara did not stay to hear the applause. She walked out of that lecture hall the same way she walked in, head held high, janitor's badge still clipped to her hoodie. But behind her, the silence she left was no longer rooted in judgment. It was awe. In the hallway, students who had ignored her for months now stared. A few reached for their phones to rewatch what they had just seen. The video was already going viral. But Amara kept walking, her footsteps echoing down the marble floor, alone, yet somehow more powerful than an army. Back inside the classroom, the professors were not celebrating. They were arguing. One slammed his fist on the desk. "She cannot be right. That problem has stumped Nobel candidates. This is not possible." Another pulled out his laptop and began cross-referencing journals. "It is not just possible, it is consistent." She used a symmetry argument I have never seen before. This could change our understanding of modular forms. The head of the department, Professor Lane, the one who invited her in as a joke, sat motionless, staring at the board. His hands trembled. "She is the real thing," he muttered. But what none of them knew was that Amara had solved that equation 3 years ago. She had just been waiting for the moment they would let her speak. And now that moment was here. Her silence was over, and the world was finally listening. Outside, Amara sat alone on the stone bench beneath the old elm tree, the one near the physics wing. It was the only place on campus where she could hear the wind without the world's noise. She placed her janitor gloves beside her, pulled out a notebook, and began to write, not equations, but a letter. A letter to the one person who always believed in her. Dear Mama, they finally saw me. Her hand paused, trembling. The words felt strange, too small for what had just happened. She had solved a problem that the academic world thought impossible. But more than that, she had shattered the idea that brilliance only wears a suit or holds a title. Back in her childhood, she used to write formulas on grocery receipts, sketching matrices while her mother worked late shifts. She applied to universities, got rejected without interviews. Overqualified, some said. Not the right fit, others claimed. So, she took the only job she could get, cleaning floors at the university that had once denied her admission. Now that same school wanted her in their research department. She looked up and saw students watching her through the windows, some in disbelief, some in admiration, some still unsure what to feel. Amara knew this moment would change something. But she also knew it would not come without cost. Because in this country, genius is not always welcomed, especially when it wears the wrong uniform, especially when it is black. The next morning, headlines began to ripple through campus forums and local news. University janitor stuns professors with unsolvable equation solution. Custodian outsmarts elite mathematicians, calls out institutional bias. But instead of celebration, the university board called an emergency meeting. Not to applaud Amara, but to manage the fallout. Their tone behind closed doors was clear. We need to make this about opportunity, not about failure of our screening. Let's offer her a scholarship. Frame it as us giving back. Dean Whitmore, who had once walked past Amara daily without eye contact, now sat across from her in a polished oak office. We were unaware of your capabilities, he said, choosing every word like a legal trap. We would be honored to offer you a full academic sponsorship and feature your story as an example of how we empower hidden talent. Amara blinked. I do not want to be your hidden talent. I want you to admit that your system was built to hide people like me. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Then she stood, calm, unapologetic. You did not empower me. You just failed to stop me. And she walked out, leaving the board scrambling behind her, their narrative crumbling. The real story was no longer theirs to control. The video of Amara solving the problem had already hit the internet, but it was her words that caught fire. You did not empower me. You just failed to stop me. Within hours, that quote was on t-shirts, tweets, protest signs. Students, black, white, immigrant, first-gen, gathered outside the campus gate holding signs that read, Genius needs no permission. We are not your hidden talents. News crews pulled up. Podcasts picked up the story. And when one national interviewer asked Amara how she felt being the face of underdog brilliance, she just smiled. I'm not the only one. I'm just the one who got the mic. But back inside the university, not everyone was clapping. Dr. Matheson and his peers watched their reputations crack under pressure. Their emails were leaked. She cleans floors. She has no place solving graduate-level math. We gave her a chance. She embarrassed us. The backlash was swift. Students demanded resignations. Alumni threatened to pull donations. But Amara never once asked for revenge. She asked for change. 1 week later, the university hosted a press conference. Cameras flashed as the dean stepped up to the podium, looking nervous. He cleared his throat. Today, we honor Amara James, not just for her intellect, but for exposing a culture we must change. Starting now, we are creating full scholarships for underrepresented staff pursuing degrees. And effective immediately. Dr. Matheson and the other faculty involved have been placed on indefinite leave. The crowd erupted in applause. But Amara? She stayed silent. She was never in it for applause. Later that evening, as she mopped the last hallway of the science building, yes, she still took her shift, someone tapped her shoulder. She turned. It was a woman in a gray suit. Elegant. Calm. Amara James? The woman asked. Amara nodded slowly. The woman smiled, handed her a crisp envelope, and said, Google's DeepMind division is offering you a full-ride graduate program, plus a paid internship. You are the kind of mind we were told did not exist. And then, she was gone. Amara stood in the empty hallway, holding the envelope, eyes wide. Because the note inside did not say congratulations. It said, thank you for proving them wrong.